Franklin Roosevelt once said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." But if you ask NFL quarterbacks of the 80s and 90s, they would say, don't forget about Bruce Smith. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Believers Talk. My name is Joe, and welcome to another Hall of Fame edition of Believers Talk, where we're spending this offseason going over every single Buffalo Bills Hall of Famer. Again, thank you guys for joining me. My name is Joe. If you're new to this channel, guys, please be sure to hit that subscribe button for continual Buffalo Bills and Buffalo sports news. After you hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, YouTube will notify you when we put out new content. While you're here, like this video and tell me what you think or what you remember about Buffalo Bills Hall of Famer Bruce Smith. That's right, this one has a little bit of a different feel, guys, as we talk about one of, if not the best, defensive ends to ever play the game. Buffalo Bills defensive end Bruce Smith. Bruce Smith still holds records within the NFL that we will talk about in this video, but we got to start at the beginning, where it all began. And then for Bruce Smith, it began in 1963. Bruce Smith was born in Norfolk, Virginia in 1963. Spent time in Virginia, even in college, where he went to Virginia Tech to be a Hokie. And from early on, you could tell how dominant of a career Bruce Smith was going to have, not just in the NFL, but he had it in college as well. While at Virginia Tech, he earned the nickname the Sack Man. And let me tell you something, that's something that Bruce Smith did very well all the time. He was the Sack Man. He is one of the most decorated Virginia Tech Hokies in their history. Had 22 sacks in his junior year in 1983, which led him to be named First Team All-American in 1983. He followed that up with another First Team All-American year in 1984. He was named to the Virginia Tech Football Hall of Fame. Also named to the College Football Hall of Fame in 2006. Obviously, after a career like that, you earn yourself the #1 overall pick. And the Buffalo Bills in 1984 had earned themselves the first pick in the 1985 NFL Draft. And if the first pick of an NFL Draft could turn out to be Bruce Smith every year, everyone would want that #1 overall pick, and people would be trading picks like it was a quarterback to get Bruce Smith. Bruce Smith was the first overall pick in the 1985 NFL Draft by our Buffalo Bills. That's right, the 1985 NFL Draft, a great draft for the Buffalo Bills, and he went on to play 19 seasons in the NFL. You want to talk about longevity, you want to talk about being available, you want to talk about being on the field. That's something Bruce Smith did consistently in his career. 19 seasons in the NFL, played 15 of those with our Buffalo Bills, 4 of those with that team from Washington that used to be called the Redskins. So, in his 19 years with the Buffalo Bills, had 171 sacks, had 29 with the Washington Redskins. Do some quick math. That means that Bruce Smith had 200 sacks total in his career, and that, my friends, was and is still an NFL record. 200 sacks. And just to kind of put that into perspective, #2 on the sacks list is Reggie White. Of course, Reggie White, one of the great defensive pass rushers to ever play the game as well, with 198 sacks. Okay, so they're 1 and 2. They're neck and neck. 200, 198. But third, another big name, another Hall of Fame name, Kevin Greene, is listed third. There's a little bit of a gap. Third place right now for most sacks all time in the NFL sits at 160 sacks. So between first place and third place in the NFL all-time sack leaders, there's 40 sacks. So just put that into perspective. Now, Aaron Donald might have something to say about that before his career is done. Currently on pace to maybe have a word, have a say, potentially break a record, but there's still a long way to go in Aaron Donald's career. Not only is Bruce Smith first in all-time sacks with 200, he is second in the NFL in all-time sacks in the playoffs, sitting in second place with 14.5 sacks through 20 games in the playoffs, only behind Willie McGinnis of the New England Patriots, who played in 18 games and had 16.5 sacks himself. So he's first in the NFL all-time, second in the NFL all-time in the playoffs in sacks. In his 19 seasons, Bruce Smith made 11 Pro Bowl appearances, and that was even after he had his season with 11 sacks, 15 sacks, and still missed the Pro Bowl. After his second season, this is in his enshrinement speech, his second season he went to his defensive coordinator, and his defensive coordinator said after the sacks, stop dancing. Apparently Bruce Smith was always dancing after his sacks, was making some people angry. They wouldn't vote him into the Pro Bowl. So that's why I missed the Pro Bowl one year. So really this should be 12 Pro Bowls, but he made 11 Pro Bowls in his 19-year career, was a first-team All-Pro 8 times during his career, had 13 seasons of 10 or more sacks, was a record at the time of his retirement, and then he played in 279 games. Now, Bruce Smith did suffer through some injuries, missed most of the 1991 NFL season due to some knee issues, and also had some time being suspended. In 1988, he spent 4 games being suspended for a league substance abuse policy. If you go back to a previous video I did just yesterday, I did speak about that along with some other Buffalo Bills suspensions. So imagine those 200 sacks, how much bigger of a number that can be. In fact, during the Hall of Fame ceremony, when talking about the 200 sacks, the person who inducted him talked about his 200 sacks and said that was when he played against someone like Dan Marino. Talk about a guy in Dan Marino, he had 9.5 sacks in his career against Dan Marino. But when you talk about Dan Marino, you have to talk about Dan Marino's quick release, right? Quick release time, always getting the ball out quickly. Same thing with another great quarterback that he would spend years playing against later in his career in Peyton Manning, right? So you talk about playing Dan Marino 2 times a year for 19 years, or, I think Dan Marino retired before Bruce Smith, but for 15 years, that's 30 games where he was facing a guy with such a quick release. Still got to him 9.5 times, but just think about how much that number could have ballooned if he didn't suffer a 4-game suspension in 1988, didn't miss most of the 1991 season due to an injury, and didn't have to play against great quarterbacks who had quick releases like Dan Marino and Peyton Manning. That number could have risen to a number that could not be beaten, and still we wonder if 200 sacks could ever be matched in the NFL. After his 19 seasons in the NFL, Bruce Smith was named to the 1980 NFL All-Decade team. But don't worry, it wasn't just the 80s that he dominated. He dominated the 90s as well, and that's why the NFL named him to the 1990 NFL All-Decade team as well. And just this past season, the NFL celebrated their 100th anniversary season. They had a 100th anniversary all-time team, and of course, you can't have that team without putting Bruce Smith on the list. Again, probably the best, if not one of the best, or one of the best, if not the best, defensive ends in NFL history. Also, he was named to the, his name was put on the Buffalo Bills Wall of Fame, but the Buffalo Bills did one better. They retired his number 78. He is one of 3 numbers retired in Buffalo Bills history. You got 78 for Bruce Smith, 34 for Thurman Thomas, and then number 12 for quarterback Jim Kelly. So those are 3 numbers that the Buffalo Bills have honored by retiring their number after they retired from the game. And he was named to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2009. When you think about Bruce Smith, and at least my recollection of Bruce Smith. One of the great things about Bruce Smith, and one of the great things about many defensive ends to ever do it, including Aaron Donald, who's doing it today, he didn't just beat you one way. If he needed to beat you with leverage, he beat you with leverage. If he needed to beat you with strength, he beat you with strength. If he needed to beat you with speed, he beat you with speed. If he needed to get to the quarterback quick because they had a quick release, he was right on top of them as soon as they released the ball, if not beforehand. In fact, he is one of only 5 players to ever record a safety, in a Super Bowl, sacking Jeff Hostetler, I believe it was, against when they played the Giants in the Super Bowl in 1990. Again, only 5 defensive players to ever record a safety in a Super Bowl. And it wasn't just in the regular season. The bigger the moment, the more he stepped up in those moments. You heard me talk about the playoff numbers, right? You talk about the playoff sacks, still second all time in playoff sacks after 20 games. You heard me talk about the safety in the Super Bowl. Also in that Super Bowl against the Giants, he stuffed the running back on a huge 4th and 2, forced a turnover on downs. We all remember that Super Bowl, a painful memory for the Buffalo Bills. But if you watched, Bruce Smith still took over that game. Might have been a loss for the Buffalo Bills, but definitely a game that we did not lose because of that defense or Bruce Smith. Listen, the Buffalo Bills in their history have had plenty of great defenses. We're in an era right now where we're talking about the Buffalo Bills having a top 3 defense for back-to-back seasons, but that was nothing compared to the defense that was led by Bruce Smith, the sack man, in the late 80s and early 90s, and this is why the Buffalo Bills made it to 4 consecutive Super Bowls. Then, of course, he went on to Washington, followed the money. Can't blame him for that. You know, Dan Snyder was handing out money like it was candy, and Bruce Smith was like, well, let me get some of that. We all know some of the big contracts that Dan Snyder signed that might not panned out, but this is one that he wasn't as bad as a lot of the other ones, right? He still had 29 sacks with the Redskins in 4 seasons, so you can't really knock him. He was still a very productive player even late in his 19-year career. So again, Bruce Smith, one of the greatest players to ever play the game, one of the greatest Buffalo Bills to ever play the game. So let me know, what do you remember about Bruce Smith? What are some of your favorite memories about Bruce Smith? Number 78, again, we could go on and on talking about the accolades that Bruce Smith accomplished. You talk about how he's in 3 Hall of Fames, the Virginia Tech Sports Hall of Fame, the College Football Hall of Fame, and the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Very few have done it as well as Bruce Smith, and I would argue that none have ever done it better. So again, guys, thank you for joining me for this Hall of Fame edition of Believers Talk as we talk about Buffalo Bills Hall of Famer Bruce Smith. If you haven't caught the previous episodes, be sure to do that. Have covered every single Hall of Famer leading up to Bruce Smith. Again, Bruce Smith was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2009 along with another famous Buffalo Bill. That's who we're going to talk about next week. We're going to talk about Ralph Wilson, the owner and founder of our Buffalo Bills. So that will be a special episode as well. So make sure you join me next Friday as we do that one. But again, if you haven't already subscribed to Believers Talk, hit that subscribe button for continual Buffalo Bills and Buffalo sports news. We go live every Thursday, and we'll go live with breaking news throughout the week. Less than 50 days until the start of the NFL season. Training camp has just started, so make sure you're tuning in to Believers Talk. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, like this video, and be sure to leave a comment. Talk about one of the best ever Bruce Smith. I look forward to talking to you all soon. Until I do, go Bills.